was pretty exciting. So they said, you go down to Modena, which is 120 miles away, and tomorrow you'll meet the old man. So I went down, stayed at the hotel, the Real Fini Hotel, and it was really an amazing feeling to sort of go and have dinner on my own, because nobody knew who the hell I was. I was just, 25-year-old farm boy, really. And so I remember sitting in this glorious hotel, just eating pasta, which of course you have to do in Italy, and a glass of Lambrusco, which actually never really tasted any better. But it was all right because you were in Modena and you had to. And the next day I was going to be a Ferrari driver if I played my cards right. So, and anyway, and the next day I got picked up. I probably drove to the factory. I can't remember. It wasn't far. And then I went in and I was shown around by this guy, and there was nobody there. There was just nobody there, nobody working at all except for this one chap taking me around. And eventually I said, so it's a Wednesday, where is everybody? And he said, they're on holiday, it's a bank holiday. And I learned over the next year and a half that bank holiday meant they were on strike. And so I went, oh dear, that's pity. Anyway, we're looking around, look at all, literally everything started there. There was the chassis had come in, and as we looked around, the chassis were up on these sort of conveyor belts and level with our shoulders with the body on and everything, and then they were bolting the engines up, or would have been if there'd been a work, building them on either side. And these glorious colours, the reds and the yellows and the blues and the blacks and all that, and silver. And then suddenly, there's nobody else there but me and this guy. And then suddenly around the corner, as far away as that door down there, comes two people. One's got sort of just a dark jacket on, the other one's sort of silver hair, tinted glasses, raincoat slightly draped over his shoulder, and 6 foot odd tall, and he's walking towards me. And the guy with me said, here comes El Commanditore now, he is the one on the left. It's very obvious, I knew exactly what Enzo looked like. So he walks up, and it was this amazing picture. And I often think about it because dear old Michael Schumacher, with all his victories and all the money he earned, never ever met Enzo Ferrari, yet he drove for Ferrari. And it's actually incredible. And I thought, with all the money in the world, I would rather have met Enzo, but just to know him, And so anyway, he's walking towards me, and either side are all his cars. And it was a magic moment. I thought, some magazine had captured that photograph, that would have summed him up, because behind him was the racing department, and then all these road cars stuck in 8 different cars at shoulder height. So that's how I met him, and we talked for about half an hour, and then he said, okay, we go to lunch. So we went across the road to the Cavallino, which is a very famous restaurant, because it was a Maranello. And so we had a bite to eat, and it was, of course, immensely good. He unfortunately wouldn't speak English, but I swear he could. So I had to speak French to him, and I didn't do that very well, but I certainly was non-existent Italian. But we were there obviously with his sort of team manager, Senor Gozzi. So we had a good chat. And all he really wanted to do was talk about drivers and how good I thought certain drivers in the world were, people that he hadn't had yet, whether he should have them or not. And that was my first meeting with him. And then 3 weeks later, I hadn't signed my contract. They offered me my contract then. And my wife at that time was in hospital in Chichester, very ill with a thing called colitis. She was only 26, 25. And so I was very dubious about signing, and I had a pretty hideous time when I got home from my mother saying, and her mother were there both. They used to drink gin and tonics in Sussex, which was rather unfortunate. And I walked in, and my mother said, I've got a telex here from Ferrari, and it says, please come back and sign your contract. And my mother said, if you sign this contract, you'll never walk in this house again. And I went, oh, that's really handy. I didn't need that sort of bad vibes. The old man, of course, my stepfather, didn't know that was being said. But anyway, despite it, I knew that they'd had a couple of glasses, so I thought, well, I'd ignore it. I went and saw my wife in hospital, and she said, how'd you get on? And I said, it was magnificent, blah, blah, blah. She said, you got to sign. And I said, well, I had a bit of a tough time with the in-laws and my mother. She said, you've got to do it, ignore them. So I did. And I went off back to Ferrari a week later and signed my contract.
And the rest is history.
And we got paid, I'll tell you, we got paid. A lot of you can have read what sports people get these days. Like, used to get £500 for a Grand Prix, 250 for a Formula 2 race. And you could buy a good suede jacket for 350. So it really wasn't that bad. But I mean, because I remember I got one from Selfridges, or Harrods one. So, money wasn't that special. But we didn't do it for the money. We did it because we wanted to win races. And at that moment, I had that, because, going back a bit, I'm sorry, but Jimmy Clark got killed in my very first professional race that year in 1968 at Hockenheim, and I was in Formula 2. It was my second race in Formula 2. And I went back to the hotel, and I'm telling you the story because you're all British, nearly all British, if you're on tough shit. Sorry, Jim Clark, British. Okay, and so he came over incidentally and won the Indy 500 first time out in the Lotus. But British engineering did that, sorry. Anyway, so I was staying at the hotel at Hockenheim the night before, obviously, the race, and with my stepfather, who had by this time coming to help me because I proved that I had the ability, as you can imagine. So I was driving Formula 2 Brabham for our little team from Pangham. And Jimmy was there and Graham, and I'd never met them, and my eyes were out on full stalks. My God, there are my two heroes, the two greatest British drivers we've had in a couple of generations. And we started to have a cup of tea together, freezing cold afternoon, rain coming down. And they said, how did you get on today? And I said, well, I qualified fourth. And I looked at Jimmy Clark, who was the world champion that year, and the year before. And I looked at him and I said, well, where are you then? Because you weren't ahead of me. I didn't say that, but I didn't see his name in front of mine. And he said, oh, I was seventh quickest. So I went, what do you mean the world champion's slower than me? So I said, but what happened? What was your problem? So you must have had a problem. And he said, I had a misfire. Or the engine was cutting out. So that was the beginning of it. And so they said, come on, we'll take you to the track tomorrow after a little conversation. We'll take you to the track in the morning. Your old man can go to the track with a mechanic, which is what happened. We drove to the track, Graham, Jimmy, and I. And I got out of the car first, and then they drove to where their car was with the Lotus team, and that was it. Sorry about that. So I went. We went out, did the race, and of course Jimmy went off during the race and into the trees, and that was it. And that's another story which I won't go into now as to why that happened or how. But that was my beginning in Formula 1. It was really shattering. And then later that year, I was in my first Grand Prix. It was the Italian Grand Prix for Ferrari, as I think I might have mentioned. And I was on the third row of the grid, which in hindsight, seventh quickest was pretty good for the first Grand Prix. And I didn't think so. I wanted to be fifth quickest, but I wasn't. And Chris Amon was on the front row in one Ferrari, Jackie Hicks on the second row in the second, and I was on the third row. And the race starts and we progress. I remember it's pretty exciting for me or dramatic, whichever way you want to look at it. And suddenly, my car stopped, which seemed to spend most of my time parked when I drove Ferraris. And so I was walking back. Excuse me. Sorry about that. You must stop it. They're not that. They are to look at, and they sound good. Exactly. Anyway, that's all right. I have one. I have a 550, so I know. And anyway, so I was walking sort of vaguely back to get inside the track to get a lift back to the pits. And as I did so, I was standing on the corner watching the leading pack come through the Lesmos, which are the corners they went through last week in the Grand Prix, same corner. And so as they came through, Chris Amon, my teammate, who I got to know quite well in the previous month, suddenly loses control, hits the guardrail backwards and disappears, lightly somersaulting through the trees. And I went, that's it. I can go back and tell my kids, I think I had one on the way or one arrived, I thought I can go back and tell my children that Dad got to Formula 1 in 4 years and quit, because I'd had enough. Jimmy had died in my first race, in professional racing, and then I assumed Chris had died in this one. And I'm not very good at the blood scenario, so I couldn't run across the track and see how he was. I'm sorry about this. Vodafone telling me I haven't used it for 2 hours. Shame on you. So anyway, and I thought, I don't want to go across the track. I mean, he disappeared, so I knew he was obviously out of sight. And so I went to go across the track, and the next thing is he walks up and he's dusting all the dirt off. And he walked back across the track, and he's doing this, and I'm going, you're all right then? He said, yeah. I said, what happened? He said, well, the car landed on its wheels. I said, oh my gosh, and he was in amongst the trees, and we got out and walked back. Yeah, sure.